every time that we've gone into a World Cup, we've always had a good squad. It's just that we don't seem to have produced our best football in the tournament. And I think that's the important factor this year, is that if England produced the form that they showed in qualification.
David Seaman wore the #1 shirt for Arsenal and England for 2 decades, but the story behind those safe hands is far more complex than most fans realise. At 62, the former goalkeeper has begun sharing the struggles that shaped him, from teenage rejection to career-ending injury, from financial anxiety to witnessing friends battle addiction. This is the untold story of resilience behind the legend. Football careers are built on dreams, but Seaman's nearly ended before it began. As a teenager in Rotherham, joining Leeds United as an apprentice felt like destiny fulfilled. In the late 1970s, Leeds wasn't just a football club, it was an institution that commanded fierce loyalty across the north. For young Seaman, wearing their colours represented everything he'd worked toward. Then came the rejection. At 18, Leeds manager Eddie Gray delivered the verdict: not good enough. Those 3 words shattered more than just professional aspirations. They demolished Seaman's sense of identity at a critical moment in his development. Unlike today's academy system, with its educational support and alternative pathways, the football world of the early 80s offered a brutal binary: make it or disappear. Seaman describes that moment as devastating, a total collapse of his projected future. He found himself exiled from the First Division glamour of Leeds to 4th Division Peterborough United. What the world would later celebrate as a remarkable rise from the lower leagues was actually born from necessity and pain. The rejection planted a permanent seed of doubt, a knowledge that the system could discard him without warning. That early wound never fully healed. It transformed how Seaman approached his career, instilling a relentless work ethic driven not just by ambition, but by the fear of being cast aside again. The boy who dreamed of Leeds would become the man who never took his position for granted, who understood that in football, as in life, security is always provisional. The joy of playing was forever shadowed by the business of survival. The modern image of professional footballers centres on wealth and excess. But Seaman's early years told a different story entirely. As an apprentice, he earned £12 per week. Adjusted for inflation, that might seem manageable on paper, but the reality was subsistence living. As Seaman noted, the money didn't last long, leaving him in a constant state of financial anxiety. The depth of this precarity revealed itself through a seemingly small incident that left lasting scars. His first car, a hand-me-down from his father, should have represented freedom and independence. Instead, it became a source of crippling stress. Attempting to maintain the vehicle himself, Seaman accidentally pushed his bank account £90 overdrawn. For most people, £90 is recoverable. For a teenager earning £12 weekly, it was an impossible mountain. The debt consumed him, stealing his sleep and filling his nights with worry about where the money would come from. The insomnia wasn't an overreaction, it was the rational response of someone living on the edge, always one mishap away from complete ruin. This experience taught Seaman what he calls a vital lesson about money management, but it imprinted something deeper: the fragility of his own existence. That early poverty shaped his later decisions, his drive to extend his playing career, his determination never to return to a place where £12 was the ceiling. The man later known for safe hands understood what it meant to have nothing to fall back on. He carried that memory with him through every contract negotiation, every decision about when to retire, every moment of professional uncertainty. A goalkeeper's body is a perpetual target, required to throw itself into harm's way thousands of times across a career. For Seaman, the physical cost was catastrophic, though often hidden behind the stoicism expected of professional athletes. In 1997, at the peak of his abilities with Arsenal and England, his Achilles tendon ruptured. For a goalkeeper, this injury is career-threatening, robbing them of the explosive power essential to their craft. The rehabilitation was lengthy and isolating. While Seaman fought to return, Alex Manninger performed admirably in his absence, sparking inevitable speculation about succession. Adding insult to literal injury, a peculiar myth emerged that Seaman had torn his Achilles reaching for a television remote control. Though he's since clarified, this was either a confusion with a separate back spasm or complete fabrication. The story persisted. The media transformed genuine trauma into a punchline, denying him the dignity of his suffering and reducing a devastating injury to comedy. Perhaps no incident better illustrates the brutal reality of his profession than the scrotal injury sustained against Leeds United. During a collision with striker Lee Chapman, the opposing player's studs began at Seaman's knee and tore upward, eventually puncturing the scrotal sac. The pain was absolute, leaving him in agony on the pitch. What happened next reveals the toxic culture of 90s football. Gordon Strachan, seeing Seaman writhing in pain, leaned over and sneered, "Get up, you southern softy." The north-south divide was weaponised to invalidate genuine suffering, reflecting an environment where vulnerability was despised. At half-time, medical staff stitched the wound. Then, Seaman returned to play the second half, enduring what he described as eye-watering pain. This is often framed as heroism, but it was actually forced self-harm, necessitated by a culture that would have treated leaving the pitch as validation of Strachan's insult. To prove he wasn't soft, Seaman subordinated his well-being to a hyper-masculine code of honour that valued toughness over health. The end came suddenly in January 2004, not through choice, but through physical collapse. During his brief spell at Manchester City, a collision with Portsmouth's Yakubu Ayegbeni shattered Seaman's shoulder. The challenge itself was accidental, but the aftermath revealed a tragic truth. Medical scans showed not just acute damage, but significant wear and tear from previous years. His shoulder, the joint most essential to goalkeeping, had essentially disintegrated under the cumulative weight of 2 decades. Thousands of dives, punches and collisions had worn it down until one final impact caused complete structural failure. At 40 years old, facing a reconstructive process that would take too long, Seaman was forced to announce immediate retirement. The safe hands could no longer lift themselves. He was replaced by Kevin Sture-Ellegaard in a chaotic 4-2 defeat, an ignoble end to a career defined by control and composure. There was no farewell match, no final wave to the supporters, just an abrupt severance from the life he'd built. The decision wasn't his to make. His body had chosen for him. Beyond his own struggles, Seaman witnessed the slow destruction of those closest to him. The Arsenal squad of the mid-90s, particularly the defensive unit, was infamous for its drinking culture, formalised as the Tuesday Club. With Wednesdays typically given as rest days, Tuesdays became designated windows for binge drinking. What began as social bonding quickly became pathological for players like Tony Adams and Paul Merson. Seaman stood as a witness to friends crossing points of no return. He watched the lines between relaxation and addiction blur, leading to public humiliations, jail sentences, and the disintegration of personal lives. Perhaps most tragic was the culture of silence that surrounded this suffering. Despite knowing Paul Merson for over 20 years, sharing showers, buses, and hotels, Seaman admitted he didn't even know the extent of the demons battling inside his teammates' head. This emotional estrangement was systemic. The locker room culture made opening up impossible. To admit struggle was to invite ridicule. Teammates would be ripped apart for showing weakness. Even stories of players' indiscretions in the press were met with laughter rather than concern. Seaman enforced this emotional quarantine unknowingly, part of a collective that isolated the sickest among them until they collapsed. His psychological insight into this era is haunting. He reflected that even the most successful players were rarely happy within themselves. driven by a desperate, unending need for external approval to fill an internal void. The trophies and accolades masked profound internal misery. The trauma extended even into retirement. The Euro 2020 final at Wembley should have been a celebration. For decades, Wembley had been Seaman's sanctuary, the stage of his greatest penalty saves and national service. But that night, the sanctuary was violated. Attending as a spectator with his wife, Seaman experienced harrowing chaos as ticketless fans stormed the stadium. He described feeling physically unsafe as fans threw cans and charged barriers. This represented a tragic inversion of his relationship with crowds. For 20 years, he'd stood with his back to supporters, protected by the rules of the game and the respect commanded by his jersey. Stripped of that uniform, sitting in the stands, he was reduced to a vulnerable civilian. The safe hands couldn't protect his wife from the mob. The trauma lingered. When Jude Bellingham scored a stunning goal for England in 2024, Seaman's celebration was so explosive it scared his wife again. While framed as an anecdote about passion, it subtly connected the two events. The raw emotion of football, once a source of pure professional focus, had become entangled with fear and startling intensity in his private life. The incident revealed how deeply the Euro 2020 chaos had affected him, transforming even moments of joy into triggers. Yet through all this adversity, Seaman endured. He survived the rejection that destroys most apprentices. He survived the poverty that forces many from the game. He survived the physical brutality of an era that viewed pain as weakness. And he survived the toxic culture that claimed the mental health of his closest friends. What makes Seaman's story remarkable isn't just the challenges he faced, but that he emerged without bitterness. He didn't succumb to the addictions that consumed his teammates. He didn't let rejection define him permanently. He built a career that spanned 2 decades at the highest level, becoming one of England's most decorated goalkeepers. The resilience required to navigate this path is extraordinary. Every save he made carried the weight of proving Leeds wrong. Every match he played through injury was a defiance of a culture that demanded he suffer in silence. Every trophy he lifted was earned not just through talent, but through sheer determination to survive in a system designed to break people. His journey from Peterborough to Arsenal represents more than just professional progression. It symbolises the transformation of a broken teenager into a champion, someone who refused to accept Eddie Gray's verdict as final. The climb through the divisions wasn't glamorous. It was necessary, driven by the knowledge that one mistake could send him back to poverty and obscurity. Now, at 62, Seaman is finally opening up about these experiences. For years, the culture of football made such honesty impossible. Vulnerability was treated as weakness. Pain was mocked. Struggle was hidden. But as attitudes toward mental health and athlete welfare slowly evolve, Seaman has found space to share his truth. His willingness to speak about the Tuesday Club, about financial anxiety, about playing through injuries that should have stopped him, helps illuminate a darker era of football. It challenges the sanitized nostalgia that surrounds 90s football, revealing the human cost behind the glory. Young players today face different pressures, but Seaman's testimony provides crucial context about how far the game has come and how far it still needs to go. The man known as Safe Hands was anything but safe throughout his career. He absorbed impacts that would have shattered others, financial blows, physical trauma, emotional scarring from watching friends suffer. Yet, he kept standing, kept diving, kept catching. Not because it was easy, but because quitting wasn't an option for someone who'd already lost everything once at Leeds. David Seaman's legacy extends beyond penalty saves and clean sheets. It's a testament to human resilience, to the capacity to endure rejection and poverty and pain without losing yourself completely. It's a reminder that behind every professional athlete's success lies a more complicated story of sacrifice and survival. The boy from Rotherham, who was told he wasn't good enough, became one of England's greatest goalkeepers. But more importantly, he became a survivor, someone who navigated an unforgiving system and emerged able to tell his story. In finally opening up, Seaman offers not just his own truth, but a window into an era of football that broke as many men as it made. His honesty is an act of courage, proving that even safe hands can tremble, and that admitting vulnerability takes more strength than any dive ever could.